once again, Mr. Azazel Jacobs. That movie, that scene when the father comes out, is so emotional. Brian Tellerico at RogerEbert.com said about the brilliance of the movie and said the performances are three of the best performances he has seen in a long time, and that the movie was one of the finest movies of the year. He said the movie is so beautiful and so emotional. He gets emotional just thinking about it as he was writing his review. I hope that he's had a chance to talk to you about it, but thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
And I'd like to welcome Nell Minow, Omar Mosafar, and Richard Roper.
We're just like the sisters. We have to figure out where we're going to sit. So, there we go.
All right. I'm going to be in, because we're all very emotional, I'm going to be in it by asking you the least emotional question I can begin with. And let me just say I'm the oldest of three sisters. This movie hits me very hard. So the least emotional question. I'm always very curious in a movie like this that begins with a list of all these different companies in association with and in cooperation with. Who are all those companies?
First off, thank you all for being here. Chaz, thank you all for the warm response. Actually, those are all, so the way that I put this together, just kind of, maybe this is the wrong, so I wrote this with those actors in mind, with the three leads, and Giovanna Depo plays Benji. And so the first and foremost thing that I did was I wrote it, and all those companies, for the most part, were people that I'm connected with that I felt like would understand the type of film that I was gonna make. So it was, I know it looks like a lot of companies, but it actually is very few. And everybody was kind of coming in for the same reasons, with the same amounts. So I sent it all to the actors, they responded, and then I reached out to these different companies who are really, I think of as individuals, but those other company names that kind of believed in this work and was able to put it together and finance it in the way that I was saying it's gonna be shot in this very specific way.
I have a question, a more emotional question, because I can't get over it. Who wrote that part about the father? Did you write that? Tell us about that scene,
Where did
because
that
that
come
just
from?
slayed me. Yes.
You know, I wrote this script very much forward. The way that I generally write is I walk through New York City with a little notepad, kind of writing like random ideas. And then at a certain point, hopefully I'm gonna find a connection between these random ideas. And then I start writing. So there's like certain spots that I know I'm gonna hit, or that I'm hoping to hit. But the only thing with the father is like I knew that I didn't want to go into that room. But when I was writing it, then suddenly I was at this place where they were bringing the father out. I found it surprising and also exciting, and also like it worried me in a way that I liked. And then this idea of getting to express these things, and that is when I was like just watching it, I was like, it's a weird mixture of my father was in the Coast Guard, so a lot of that. Bliss is somebody that I lost, that I love and I think about all the time. It's like these random things that you just hold on to throughout your life that suddenly reveals itself. Oh, this is a place I could put that out.
I love the fact that we didn't go into that room, that he came out into the world and got to express everything. I do have to ask one other question, because I've seen this film, I think, 3 times now, and at the end, the father, he's on the seal, he sees himself, he's had his out-of-body experience, and it wasn't just his imagination, he really did express all those things to the daughters, right? Because I had a question about that. Is that ambiguous?
Well, I definitely don't mean it to be ambiguous that when we see him, when we cut to him and he's dying, all the wires and everything is there. So he never actually got out of his chair or any of that. None of that happened. Other than they brought they brought him out, and well, at the same time, for me, I felt like we were like I wanted to hear those things, and I felt we as an audience got to hear those things, and I like in my mind that the daughters felt it, and I also like the idea that maybe it was the daughter's fantasy of what their dad could have said. So, yeah, sorry, that's
Well, it's a big swing, and I'm sure there were moments, and I think it works absolutely in spectacularly successful fashion. It's beautiful. But I'm wondering if there were some considerations when you're writing this, because everything is so grounded in this reality, and the sound of that monitor becomes this metronome and then becomes this almost like tick-tock, tick-tock, of death itself. So were there moments when you thought, is this going to take people out of this? Should we, is it necessary? I think it is, of course, but I'm just wondering as an artist what you thought about that.
It was a big thing other than like. So what was also incredible about this shooting of this film, we shot it on film, we shot it in an actual New York City apartment, but we also shot it, for the most part, completely in order, which really never happens, but because we're in one space, so it meant that we were going, by the time we shot the father, J.O. Sanders coming in, like it was really the end, the last couple of days of filming. And everything was like, I'd worked with Sam Levy, the cinematographer, for a good long period of planning everything out. And then there was a looseness that I really wanted to that particular scene in terms of like, I knew the father went to the kitchen and to the table, but how that whole thing was gonna, and how the daughters were gonna react and taking the place, that was really us kind of just finding it as we were working that out. So that kind of jump definitely worried me. I thought Jay came in and he just did such a beautiful job. So that really like gave me some courage. But there is that thing where you always hear, like as a writer especially, if a script or a film can exist without a scene, then you don't need that scene. And this film really works completely fine without. Like they go into that room and then you cut to them and it's an empty chair and they're and you would never know this was missing. But for me, it felt like, okay, that feels like a very small, like I know that film, and then this felt like a risk that I could lose people, but who it would speak to was worth speaking to, because I needed that. I would say that I did one work in progress screening with just like about 20 people that were all very close people and filmmakers. And there's a few filmmakers, friends, very close friends that I love, and I love their work, who felt very, very passionately in this rough cut screening that I should cut that scene out. And then there was cut the father scene completely because of this thing of being like, you have your film and it goes into this other direction. And then there was a few other people that felt very, very strongly that I should keep it in. And it was interesting because there was mixed that the people that wanted me to keep it in were all women, and the people that wanted me to take it out were men, and that was interesting to me. But I walked away and I knew that they were both right, and my wife is a producer on the film and was involved in from the first draft until the end. And I had one of those sleepless nights where I was like, I know I need to keep this scene in, but I also understand there's something that feels unnecessary still. And Diaz, my wife, came into the edit room for that particular scene, and we just worked on it. She's like basically, if you're gonna keep the scene, just make every frame that you can stand behind and go down with if that's the reaction. And it really was a kind of incredible way where like maybe that scene was a few minutes longer and I was just able to, together, the two of us. Otherwise, I was in the edit room by myself. Like, we were able to get through and just say, okay, at least if it doesn't work, I know that everything was very intentional, like the rest of the film.
Omar?
Yeah, I mean, on this scene, first I have to comment that much of my work is as a chaplain. So I'm Angel. I hate Angel. Not the character, that's me up there, right? But Angel is basically saying, here's what you need to hear, right? Here's what you need to hear in the moment. But what I loved about the father scene is that's what we all want. We want the closure. We want the exit interview. You know, that moment where you just lay it all out, everything you wish you said in your life. And for whatever reason, you didn't, you meant to, but here it is. And that, I mean, the film would have been fantastic without that, but it just entered a whole different stratosphere. So thank you for having that.
I totally agree. I'm very interested that you chose to make the film about 3 women. Is that because if it was 3 brothers, they wouldn't talk to each other?
I knew the 3 actors well enough that like maybe about 4 or 5 pages into it, I realized I was picturing each of them, and especially I was picturing I was hearing their voices and I was picturing their rhythm, and so there's definitely that, which was like, oh, these are a few amazing actors that I that I want to work with, and I want to make something with, and like ever since I've ever crossed paths or worked with them in previous things, like Javon or whatever, we just kind of keep connecting every few months, and so it's not like so shocking to me that I wrote with them already in mind. I would say it wasn't so much a choice other than that this film like came a lot from just trying to trust my instinct and not second guess myself.
Well, I just want to follow up quite seriously and say that I think you're especially gifted with women performers in French Exit and in this film, and so I wonder how you accomplish that. We've talked so much today about the importance of women directing women. I really want to give you credit for doing just a superb job.
I appreciate that. I think that it was, I felt calling it his 3 daughters and knowing that it was always coming through the perspective of, at least if it's not coming through the fathers, it's like their eyes through their fathers of each other. And that was a way to recognize that it was coming from, like, that I'm a male and that I'm writing these characters, that kind of gaze was over everything. So I wasn't trying to assume that I could be, I wanted that to be acknowledged, the kind of father's presence looming over everything that, at least that was happening in this house. I don't know, I think that it's easier for me to be honest about things, not writing about characters that look like me.
Interesting. Richard.
I was also going to mention the attention to detail is so pitch perfect here. As someone who had a 5-team parlay today that didn't hit, you got all of that exactly right. And the humor too. By the way, you know, Angel's kind of a hospice mobster. God forbid you don't call in time and you wait a while, something should happen.
That's me.
Yeah,
When I go to people's
but I mean,
houses.
your timing is so great as a writer to know the moment to sprinkle in that, you know, to let us all take that breath and enjoy the camaraderie. But I also wanted to ask a little bit about the production design and the amazing attention to detail. I noticed, like, throughout, we see all these plants, and the plants are thriving, which I kind of interpreted to mean, like, Rachel's not really just getting high in her room and not paying attention to things. She's making this a happy, thriving, living, breathing place. Was that a deliberate decision for us to see those plants in almost every corner?
Yeah, I pictured the actors, specifically, those 3 leads in Javon, and I pictured a place like that, not that specific apartment, but I had a very strong idea of like the type of apartments that I would sleep over growing up in the city. And you could always feel the family in the walls. Like you could feel the fights, and you could feel the good and the bad times in those apartments. And so I was like chasing after something very specific, a feeling that I couldn't totally articulate. And I wound up me reaching out to all sorts of kids that I grew up to see if they still lived in these different apartments, which was like an interesting journey because I'm 52 and suddenly like there's this wave of us all losing our parents. So there's like that kind of was in a way preparation for just seeing how suddenly this thing that I've been going through is not, is widespread in my whatever, kids around me. So that did lead me to these apartments in the Lower East Side. And it was one of these kind of incredible situations where the building was amazing. They sent out an email to all 900 units saying that I was looking to, like, it's a city kid that wants to shoot a film in the city, like, would you be up for that? Like, and so many doors opened up. And that particular place, when I walked in there, which had that very, very strange thin wall, like that I felt like there was enough of it to play that felt theatrical in the way that this film is playing with, especially in the beginning where everybody's kind of performing roles.
Isolated.
Yeah, like, and I could feel the stage, and I also could feel like, oh, this light could only come from this kind of breathing city out there. So in reality, it was a young couple that lived there that us renting out for a while would be helpful financially. So they moved out, and everything was dressed, like all the light switches were changed to look to go older, and paint and the floor, everything got completely brought back to a certain time. But it gave me like an incredible amount of control to chase up after those type of details. And I worked very, very closely with the production designer and my wife, who also did the costumes. And it's kind of usually my way into even connecting with actors, is that by that point I've talked about so much with Diaz that we have an idea of what those colors are, what those clothes are, and we can kind of build out the world from that.
And Omar, you are a chaplain, and you deal with hospice, end-of-life situations. How did you find that as compared to what you do?
Well, I found it therapeutic, right? I will see myself having people watch this film, right, as preparation, seeing themselves on the screen. You know, we had 3 people who had their own different ways of coping, right? Of course, we had the weed, we had the alcohol, we had the yoga and such. 3 very, very distinct personalities in terms of how they filter life, how they make peace with life and such. And then sometimes they come crashing against each other, and sometimes they just synchronize with each other. And I just found this film so, so true to life that I just could not take my eyes off the screen, you know. And even speaking about the production design, I love that thin wall, you know, how it's separated space. And the apartment, on the one hand, seems very small, yet emotionally at times, everyone is just so far away in their own little boxes. And then sometimes they just come together. And there's even those moments where it seemed like the color changed. There's one moment where Carrie Coons' character, she's talking near the window, and it's sort of a beige-ish, and then it turns blue. This was fantastic. If you could share more.
Well, thank you for that. I just want to say that, like, I love Angel, right? Like, I think what I feel like, at least what I was aiming for was this balance of being like, he's there as much as he possibly can, but he also is going to another family. And to do that balance and be like, actually give them the space so that they could bond, even if it was attacking them that brings those 2 sisters together, that was okay, that it was a sacrifice in his own way to be that person. And I feel like this whole experience that I've gone through with my folks, like, I just cannot believe that those souls exist, these caretakers, these people that come in at this time. Like, no matter, I don't know what their faith is. I don't know what their politics are. I don't know anything, and I just see them caring for my parents like it's their own parents. And it's like the one thing that I'll read the headlines and it'll be so horrible, and then I'll deal with these individuals and I'll think like, oh, it's actually so much closer on an individual base. So it's actually given me great faith to be around.
Yeah, that's, I spent much of the day sitting here in the chair, literally talking to families all day long, or even in the Hyatt, just talking to families all day long. And what I love about this type of film, and this film in particular, is that the whole essence of this human experience is just, what do we have with each other, right? I love that line that death, ultimately, it's this absence, and everything else is just fantasy, and everything else we want to fill in with it. Yeah, thank you for that.
I
And
want
Omar,
everyone
I
to-
particularly wanted Omar on this panel because he is a person of such deep compassion and kindness and empathy, all the things that we talk about.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Everybody get your questions ready. We're going to do one or two more up here, and then we're going to open it up to the audience. I want to particularly
Yeah, get the microphones, please.
compliment the costume design. My daughter's a costume designer in Hollywood, so I always pay attention to that. And I love the way that the clothes that they were wearing kind of deteriorated over the space of the movie, especially Carrie Coons, who was so wrapped up at the beginning, and then she's wearing kind of a t-shirt at the end, and the little rip under Elizabeth Olsen's arm. I thought that was just so well done. But going back to the apartment for a minute, it is a limited space. It is almost theatrical, except for when you're outside. How did you make that feel constrained and yet not claustrophobic for the audience?
I mean, I think I was trying to play with that constraints, and also definitely like the when Rachel went out is when I felt like we really needed to go out, when I needed to get air. The film for me was kind of broken into these three different places of just like, I can't believe this is gonna happen, this is gonna happen, when is this gonna happen? This idea of kind of going from like total dreading to suddenly waiting, which is confusing, but your life can't be put on pause forever, and like you start thinking about these things. So breaking it up into just so that we could feel confined and feel time stretch out when they did was the way that I worked. And I really wrote knowing that I was gonna edit, and I shot knowing that I was gonna edit, so I tried to be very specific about how time could collapse and expand. Because I think that's the one thing that's been strangest about being around loved ones that have passed is how that effect on time. It's very, very odd to me, where you're just like, you're waiting, you're just like, oh, I think I'm gonna eat, and then hours have gone by and you haven't eaten, and you don't know what happened between those hours.
I also loved the boyfriend.
Yeah.
And
Javon.
Javon, and the way Angel said what they needed to hear, but then he especially said what they needed to hear. And they're also like perfect foils for each other, although I don't think they're ever in the same scene, except maybe towards one moment. But yeah, tell us about what he was like working with throughout this whole process.
Yeah, I worked with him on a show that he did with Elizabeth Olsen called Sorry for Your Loss, and we worked, we only had a couple of scenes together, but I was just like, whoa, I want to work with Javon. And then we just kept on staying in touch, and again, it was like somebody that I was just kind of holding on to, and definitely knew I needed, I wanted somebody to express something that I knew Rachel couldn't. And so it really was one of these strange things of like writing specifically for people that then responded to the script and all said yes, and we're excited to work with each other. And so Javon had worked with Lizzie on her show, and Javon was in The Leftovers with Carrie. So there was like this close relationship, but individually, because Carrie and Natasha and Lizzie all hadn't met each other beforehand. So there was like, in a strange way, Javon was a big link between people.
Was Carrie Coon working on this and White Lotus at the same time, or in what?
No,
she
they
was
shot that
supposed to be here
afterwards.
tonight, and she wanted us to extend her apologies. She was scheduled to be here and had to, I think it's because of work that she couldn't, but she wanted you to know that she really wanted to be here tonight.
Yeah, she expressed the same to me. So No, she was shooting Gilded Age. They were supposed to wrap in like September, let's just say, and so we were all set to go, and everybody else's schedules, and everybody was kind of planned for that, and then suddenly like COVID had extended Gilded Age, so the next thing you knew, we found out that they weren't going to wrap to about November, and what was really special was then I went back to, to Elizabeth Olsen and to Natasha Lyonne and everybody and said, like, they're going to go for a while, and everybody just immediately said, let's just wait. And that doesn't usually happen where people are just like, let's hold on to each other and just wait once there's a moment it's available. So the moment they wrapped, we went straight into it, and we shot between right after Thanksgiving and right before Christmas. So it was about 17 days of shooting.
I read a lovely thing that you said about Natasha Lyonne. You said that she would have been a big success in the silent era. So what did you mean by that?
I mean, everybody knows Natasha's kind of, amazing voice and amazing like wit and just how quick she is, but just what she's able to communicate and all that she's able to communicate just by her body and what these kind of amazing silent actors did. Like when I was in the edit room, all of them I would watch doing choices, but because that character is holding so much in, you kind of have to see it. You kind of have to some sense of it. So you saw it like with the plants, but you have to get a sense that there's actually going on from the first frame on, even though she's not saying anything about it. So I just think Natasha's just all of them, but like absolutely brilliant at expressing things without words.
Have we got a question
Who
from
have
the
questions
audience?
in the audience? Who has the microphone?
Got one coming.
Microphone?
Got one coming right.
Yeah,
right
in the balcony, in the center.
Of course.
Balcony
It's,
center?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for the wonderful experience that was this movie. What was really striking to me was how fleshed out each character was, and as you've been mentioning, you've kind of written these characters with certain actresses in mind. So I was curious what your process was writing these characters and bringing them to life on the page, but then collaborating with these amazing actresses to really bring them to life for the final product.
Thank you again. Thank you for that. What was really nice is that they responded very strongly to the script. So there was a decision to not change any words. So what we could do is find out how they can make these words their own. What the space was, how the speed was, where they were going to be, how they were going to express these things. We wound up having about 4 or 5 days of rehearsal in the apartment before shooting, and that was extremely helpful just in terms of just like being able to go through and get a sense of like each of them touching these characters, but not totally like going for it. But it gave us the actual space, the limitations of that space. Suddenly they were figuring out, okay, this is how I'm coming from, just them knowing where the rooms were. Again, shooting in order was like one of these things that you can only do if the film is as small as it was. And that really helped in terms of just like building and tracking, breaking down this kind of a theatrical beginning of it. And then I would say that all three of them, we're just talking about the leads, they approached their works completely different. So each of them was asking for something else. So, like Natasha and I, when we met up, we just walked around the city just talking about anything else. Lizzie and I spent a bunch of days going through, watching movies and just talking about people that we knew that we could find our way into Christina. And then Carrie was very much just like, it's all on the page for me. If I have any questions, I'll ask you.
I think we've got time for 2 more questions.
No,
and
well, right,
yeah,
we
see
have a
one here.
microphone right here in the front.
First of all, the moment that the father looked over at his own body, I realized what you were doing, so I didn't find it a mystery, and I found it incredibly helpful. Roger Ebert frequently talked about Ozu and how he would look at a tea cup and just hold it there to imbue the scene with the emotion, and I found you were doing similar things, and I'm sure you would have loved this movie. And lastly, I spent several hours in the hospital with a friend of mine over 55 years who's currently dying. Thank you for this.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that.
I also have to comment, every time I enter this theater for the first time for Ebertfest, I look for the brown chair.
Yeah, me too.
And here we had the brown chair.
Yeah.
And yeah, that took me to all kinds of different places.
Microphone.
Where are we?
I think, do I see someone in the balcony with one?
I think everyone's still absorbing this movie.
I think we kept people for a long time.
Oh, wait, right here.
All right. There we go. Last question.
Hello, I'm talking through my mask, but I'm so glad to be back in a theater. I wanted to say that the scene that's everyone's talking about, and maybe you've had some loss. You're 52, you said I'm 52. My grandmother went through hospice, and anyone that's on morphine, you know that they can't have a lucid conversation like that. So I was a little mad at you. It's like, this can't happen, but then when it hit, I had never considered that my grandmother might be having thoughts in her dream at some part in that process. And I imagine for a lot of people that lost loved ones to COVID, that scene might be a real gift. Any thoughts on that?
I mean, it means, first off, it means a lot. I also get upset. I felt like if there's anything that I tried to talk about was how much it hurts when films lie about death, and how much that hurt me once I experienced death for the first time, and it felt like, oh, no slow motion, no music, none of this. And so I did try to both address that by Christina's story saying about how, angry it made him, and how much that this was all fantasy, and then but the kind of amazing things about movies is that we can have that fantasy, that we can do that. So I was trying to do hold both things, which is like, films can be completely truthful, and they can be completely magical, and those things can coexist or be in contrast with each other, be okay.
So, the day before Roger passed away, I went to the hospital that morning to visit because he was actually supposed to be coming home. And he looked at me and he asked the nurse to leave the room, and he wrote, "This is an illusion." And I said, "What's an illusion?" He said, "Everything." He pointed to the ceiling, the walls, outside, this whole world. It's a hoax. He said, "I went to this place of vastness, something you can't even imagine." He said, "This is all just a prelude to it." And I thought it was his medication. I really did. And then the doctors told me he's not on any pain medication. So I wish I had a chance to have a longer conversation with him about this other place that he went to and why he felt this was all an illusion and a hoax.
Jazz, thank you. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you. This is
Thank you.
wonderful.
Thank you, Azazel Jacobs.